realized he should probably just call it quits and resigns, and then Deng's protege takes over, and Deng pretty much calls the shots. So today we are completely shifting gears, going to the other side of the world, and we're going to talk about communism in crisis in Poland, East Germany, and then Czechoslovakia. We shall start with Poland here. All right, so there is problems in Poland. I mean, really the first Eastern Bloc country, the first country that the USSR gained control of and refused to let go of, and blah, 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 blah. So what has happened while other economies around the world are struggling in the 60s and 70s, Poland is also struggling in the 60s and 70s, and as we're getting closer to 1980, you really see mass poverty in Poland. I mean, it's like 60% of the people are living in poverty. It's just really miserable. So what happens is a union kind of springs up called Solidarity. And it was originally a trade union, and their whole thing was, we want to try to help the workers. I mean, workers are in really bad shape, just poor working conditions. There's no way for advancement. They're not making sufficient to feed their families. So they thought if they banded together, maybe they could, like, stand up for the workers in Poland. But what ends up happening when we get to like 1980 is that Solidarity is shifting. The leaders of Solidarity are like, this isn't enough. Like, us standing up to like the factory workers isn't sufficient. What we need is change at the political level. So they went from being the sort of trade union to being like a political party. And the problem is, this is communism. There are no political parties. So they tried to make themselves a sort of political force that was going to, get the government to work with them. And it doesn't work. In 1980, they tried to do something that would get the government's attention, and since they're all workers, they thought what a great idea it would be if the workers went on strike. And then the government would be forced to at least listen to them. So they began this series of strikes throughout Poland, and I don't think they got the response they were hoping. Because what happened is the president was like, get back to work! And they were like, no, we want negotiation! And the president of Poland called the president of the USSR, who was Brezhnev at the time, and said, I need help. And Brezhnev says, I got this, and sent in tanks. And said, I want every Solidarity leader arrested, and we're going to throw their little butts in jail and execute them. And so Solidarity goes underground. Like, just kidding. And they place Poland under martial law with the USSR. So the government asks the USSR for help, and the USSR placed Poland under martial law. And they technically feel they have the right to do that because a few years ago, Brezhnev, who was very militant, kind of told you that already, had passed something called the Brezhnev Doctrine, where he basically said the USSR has the right to intervene in any of the Eastern Bloc countries to keep them stable. Now, that's not an unusual doctrine. I don't know how much you remember, but last year we have the Roosevelt corollary that says the exact same thing. The United States has the right to intervene to keep our neighbors stable. So that's not like an unusual kind of doctrine in the world. So it is justified then that they send their troops in to keep their neighbor stable. So they begin arresting all the leaders of Solidarity, and Solidarity goes underground and disappears from the political ring completely. So we don't really hear from Solidarity anymore because they're terrified. But then Brezhnev dies. Andropov takes over, but he dies a year and a half later. Another guy takes over, and then in 1985, Gorbachev takes over. So Gorbachev's a little different. Like, you already know that. So he kind of withdraws all the military from Poland. And so Solidarity's like, what do you think? Think it's a trap? Just like everyone did. Like, what do you think? Think it's a trap? Think they're trying to lure us out? And they're like, I don't think so. Look at what he's doing in Russia. Like, think this guy's legit. So Solidarity starts kind of coming back out openly, recruiting members, having like meetings, and by 1988, Solidarity feels secure enough that Gorbachev won't intervene. So they begin strikes again. And the Polish government is once again trying to put down these strikes, and once again they call the USSR for help. But this time they get Gorbachev, and Gorbachev's like, yeah, I don't think so. And the Polish government's like, you have to! According to the Brezhnev doctrine, you're supposed to see your neighbor stable, and we're not stable, and we need your help. You need to come down here. And Gorbachev's like, you know, you're so right. So in 1989, he repeals the doctrine. And so now there is no Brezhnev doctrine. So he doesn't have to do it. And so the president of Poland's so frustrated, but now he's really stuck because he has no support. He can't put down the strikers on his own. And so he's all like flustered. And people are like, why don't you just listen to them? Like, listen to what they have to say. And he's like, fine. So in his frustration, he agrees to meet with the heads of Solidarity. But they are concerned that this is all for show. And so he's like, no. I'm being told that we need to work this out. So we'll make it a round table. And I don't know if y'all know what that means. So round table means there's no head of the table, right? So like a regular table, you have the head of the table and then everyone else. In a round table, everyone's equal. So they had a round table with Solidarity. And, you know, what do you want? We want political change. And they're like, well, we don't want to give up the power. Well, there has to be a way we can both compromise. So what Poland and the government, the communist government, agreed to do was have a bicameral legislature. So a two-house Congress. These are the people who make laws. So a bicameral legislature where the existing Congress, that's all communist, would make up one of the houses, the lower house, and the upper house would be elected by the people. So we have both worlds. People, one house elected by the people, and one house that is the existing communist government. And in order to pass a law, they both have to agree. So this was the compromise that they agreed upon, but this means the communists are no longer in control of Poland, and Poland has fallen from communism. Okay, East Germany. Now there are other countries, there are many communist countries that all fall, but IB is only concerned with these. So these are the only ones we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about East Germany. Hungary, its neighbor, is also communist and is in the process of figuring it out like Poland. So they're having kind of mass demonstrations. They've had some bloodshed. It's been kind of ugly in Hungary, but they're trying to work it out. But one of the things that Hungary did during this sort of crazy time is they decided to open their border to East Germany. Now, it is legal in East Germany to travel to Hungary because Hungary was a communist country. But it's guarded, like it's kind of like trying to get to Mexico. We have to stop, you have to kind of wait. And what Hungary did is they kind of just like raised the gates and said anyone who wants to come in can come in. So what people started doing is they started leaving East Germany, going into Hungary, going into Austria, and going into West Germany. So they're escaping East Germany and ending up on the other side in West Germany. And East Germany's like, stop it! And Hungary's like, well, I mean, we opened the gates. It's not my fault you can't keep your people in check. And East Germany's like, oh, all travel forbidden. No one travels to Hungary anymore. It doesn't work. The border's open. So people keep fleeing. And they're like, we have to stop this. So here we go. Hungary opens its border. So East Germans are going crazy. We'll draw a little happy face. So they closed travel to Hungary. No one can travel to Hungary anymore. We're not giving you permission to do that. So then Czechoslovakia opens their border. And so it's like, okay, well, if we can't go through Hungary, we'll go through Czechoslovakia because it's still legal to travel from East Germany to Czechoslovakia because it's still a communist country. And so they kind of shifted from going through Hungary to going through Czechoslovakia. And they're like, you can't travel, you can't travel anywhere. People in East Germany aren't allowed to leave anywhere. Ha! So here we go, they close the border. But then they begin cracking down on the people still trying to escape. Because they're still trying to escape by the tens of thousands. So on October 2nd, 1989, the East German president calls the military and issues a new order, and he referred to it as shoot and kill. Anyone trying to escape. No arrests. They all die. So, he's serious. No one leaves. Or you would die. 4 days later, on October 6th, is East Germany's birthday. Their 40th anniversary of being a country. And they planned this huge celebration, and now the military is everywhere. And Gorby visits. Of course he does. He's the head of the USSR. He's responsible for them becoming, not he personally, Russia's responsible for them becoming a country. So on the 40th anniversary, Gorby visits, and he's looking around, and there's like military everywhere, and he's like, what is going on? And the East German president's like, they're sitting there trying to escape. I have to stop them. The only way I can stop them is to shoot them. And Gorby's like, if they don't want to be here, that should tell you something. And he's like, they do not run the country. And Gorbachev's like, you should really listen to them. You should listen to what your people want. He's like, so Gorby visits and urges him to listen to the people, that they should reform. They should try restructuring. They should try openness. And he is like, no! And so Gorby's like, just saying, I'm not going to back you up on this. And so then Gorby leaves the next day, and after he urges, that you should really consider reform. And the president is so angry. He's like, this is my Germany. I am not going to concede my Germany. But it's unrest is everywhere. And finally he's like, you know what? I will not be the one who reforms this country. I do not believe in it. I do not agree with this. And if that's what you guys want, fine. But you're not going to get it through me. I quit. Everyone's like, I'm so sad. Okay, yeah, we're all really sad that you quit. So the new president's like, I'll work with you. Let's stop the whole shoot and kill thing. But we really need to figure this out. And people are like, it's too late. People are still trying to flood out of East Germany. And he was like, you know what? If people really just want to get out, we should let them. And he called up Berlin and said, open the gates. We're going to let them all out. So the Berlin Wall is opened through the very few gates that they had. They just opened them. And when people saw that, they flooded to the Berlin Wall. They're scaling the wall, they're climbing, they're standing up at the top dancing. We consider this the falling of the Berlin Wall. So the new president opens the door on November 9th, 1989, the Berlin Wall falls. Which is a big deal, because I don't know if you remember back in the day when I told you why they built the Berlin Wall. It's not built just to keep people from escaping. It was built by Khrushchev as a symbol that there would never be peace between the East and the West, and now it has fallen. It's deep. Moving on. Czechoslovakia. Last one. Okay. Czechoslovakia, the fall of Czechoslovakia's communism is referred to as the Velvet Revolution. I don't know if you have ever felt velvet. So here's what happens in Czechoslovakia. Like bloodshed everywhere, right? Martial law, tanks, the whole thing. Here's what happens in Czechoslovakia. The Berlin Wall fell. Oh my gosh, did you guys hear the Berlin Wall fell? That's crazy. we should do something, yeah. So all the students were like, we should tell the government that we want this too. They're like, yeah. So there's a huge university student protest on November 17th. So November 9th, the Berlin Wall falls. November 17th, there's a huge student demonstration. Huge, thousands of people. And nobody knows what to do. They're like, what are we supposed to do? They're like, I don't know, it might turn into a riot. I mean, that's what usually happens, right? Look at, Tiananmen Square. I mean, look at all these other places. That's what usually happens, right? So they did not know what to do, so they called the police and said there's a riot. So the police were like, oh my God, a riot in Czechoslovakia? Okay, we're prepared for this. So they sent the riot police. So they've got like the shields and stuff, they're shooting tear gas into it, they've got like their clubs and they're like beating the protesters and I mean, they didn't kill anyone, they just kind of beat them a little and the students were like, ah! And then it was over. So the riot police, there is some beatings. I think a few people went to the hospital from the beatings. And the police were like, I can't believe we had to do that. I know, it was awful. So 2 days later, there's another student protest, much bigger and more widespread. And what are we gonna do this time? I don't know. So the police were like, well, I mean, technically last time they didn't really like do any damage. Like, I mean, it's not like the students were like burning stuff down or throwing rocks at us. I'm like, no. So the police were like, well, let's just see what happens. They're like, okay. So the police show up and they're just like monitoring them. And the students are all peaceful, like, we just want, to change, we want democracy, blah, blah. And the police are just like, it's cool. Yeah, okay, go ahead. So this is their big demonstration. So the police show up, they monitor, but they don't intervene.
Excuse this interruption. We wanted to make sure that the following junior varsity flag football players would be excused and released down to the football field. They are to take a team picture at the football field. Teachers, please check your Valley 552 icon for the students to be excused and released. The second announcement brief is for the senior quotes. Seniors, you must submit your 40-character quote by February 5th to the link that should be posted on your teachers' boards. Thank you.
All right, so glad we got interrupted for this. All right, so the police are just kind of checking things out. In the meantime, the students are like, we need to get other people involved in this. So they start having these sort of public forums. So they would go to the library and say, would it be okay if we use the room and kind of have like a public forum where people can come talk? And they're like, sure. So they invited everybody. So workers go, farmers go, business leaders. All these people start showing up at all these meetings and they just start talking about what they'd like to see change. And yes, the government knows about it, but nothing is dangerous. There's no violence. So the government allows this to happen. So then what they decide at these forums, because they have them for like a week, is that we need to show the government like one voice. All citizens stand united. And they're like, okay, what can we do? I mean, because we're not angry at the government. We just want to change. They're like, yeah, so we don't want to do anything really bad. They're like, well, what about a strike? The strike doesn't really hurt anybody. Not if everybody goes on strike at the same time. They're like, you're right. Yeah, but I mean, that'll hurt business because you're right. So we'll do it for 2 hours. Perfect. So on November 27th, all citizens of Czechoslovakia go on strike for 2 hours. And the government's like, holy crap, the entire country went on strike. Like, they really are unified in what they want. That's on November 27th. On November 28th, the president of Czechoslovakia makes a speech where he says the government will relinquish control. And then about 2 weeks later, on November 10th, the president appoints a temporary president and sets up an election for the people to vote for their new president, and communism is over. And all the other countries are like, that's it? Like, that's your revolution? They're like, yes. Alright, president appoints a provisional or temporary president and then helps set up election. And that's the end. And just FYI, to let you know, this has nothing to do with this, but Czechoslovakia is really like two separate countries. You have the Czech people and then you have the Slavic people down at the bottom. And they were forced together after World War II, and they've lived under Czechoslovakia since then. And a couple years after this, they were like, you know, have you noticed that when we vote on stuff, that it's usually like all the Northerners, like, you know, all the Czech people all kind of vote this way, and the Slavic people all kind of vote that way. And they're like, yeah. It's like, do you think we should split up? Like, split into two countries? And they're like, let's vote. So they vote on it, they all agree that that would be a good idea. So they just split up peacefully. It's called the Velvet Divorce. All right, questions on this? All right, cool. You have a book assignment.